NBC 15's Hurricane Aware, sponsored by Chris Francis Tree Care and CNC, Catastrophe and National Claims.
Another hurricane season is here. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls. I'm at Gulf Quest Maritime Museum on the Mobile River. This is a beautiful location, but it's also a location that is very vulnerable to storm surge and to wind. This building is designed to stand up to that, and it's just one of the things you have to start thinking about when we talk about preparing for hurricane season. It's building for the hazards we know we can get around here. We go into hurricane season, and the first thing people ask is, well, what's the outlook for the hurricane season? Let's be perfectly clear. There are dozens of agencies and entities that create hurricane seasonal forecasts, but no one of them helps us right here know what sort of impact we might see. It doesn't tell us how many times we might see an impact. So we have to prepare for each hurricane using the cliche, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And when it happens, that's when you and your family need to be prepared. That's the purpose of this program, Hurricane Aware 2023. It's all about all of us getting ready for what we know could be inevitable. In the preseason, meteorologists like myself, along with emergency managers, we practice, we train, we study. We look at past storms like Hurricane Ian, and we try to pull back lessons from that on how we can forecast better, how we can communicate to the public better, because unfortunately, oftentimes the forecast is very accurate, but it's misinterpreted or it's misunderstood. So I had the honor of being an invited speaker at the National Tropical Weather Conference not too long ago. I presented on weather and communication, but I also had a bigger honor of talking with fellow professionals who helped me understand a different perspective of what it is we do. For example, we get a hurricane warning. You might have a storm surge evacuation. A lot of people don't take action. They don't do anything. So I asked Dr. Susan Jasko why that is.
A lack of experience with that extreme circumstance and not thinking, we have this optimism bias in humans, so it wouldn't really happen to them. Mm-hmm. Or if something happens, it won't really be extreme, then I won't need an ambulance or I won't need some other kind of urgent care. I think another problem is sometimes not hearing all of the details. That is, sort of self-filtering without really realizing it, holding on to a little bit of it, but not enough of it to motivate them to get out.
When you are told to get out, get out. Let's go inside Gulf Quest Maritime Museum, where there are multiple exhibits related to maritime activities and meteorology. We'll start at the Extreme Storms exhibit. Into hurricane season, we obviously very closely watch the Gulf of Mexico. It's the playground for hurricanes. And the issue is, when you get a hurricane in the playground, everybody along the Gulf Coast is watching it like dodgeball. Am I going to be the target? A lot of times we don't know. But we do know that when something is likely to get in the Gulf, social media lights up with speculation. Remember last year? Remember the early social media forecasts for Hurricane Ian? It had it pretty close to where we are. But you remember, Ian ended up south of Tampa. Big difference, which is why you cannot totally rely on those projections. What you must do, though, is keep up with the forecast from a trusted source and plan and be prepared by ensuring your property, most of all, and your possessions. Meteorologist Kelly Foster has more on that.
We caught up with one of Mobile's State Farm agents, Makita Nichols. She gave us 5 things to check off our list. First, purchase enough insurance, especially if you're renting. She says ask yourself, how much would it cost for me to replace my contents? Next, get the right type of policy. Nichols says you can have a house that's worth on tax record $200,000, but it might take $300,000 to rebuild. Third, prepare an evacuation plan in advance because there are storms when we just need to leave town. Also, hurricane-proof your home. Nichols recommends having your home fortified. She says there is less loss in the wake of a storm. And last, but certainly not least, review your policy and know your percentage.
But I recommend at least once a year or every 2 years, call your agent and ask them to review your coverages and look at everything. Because some companies have a percentage on the deductible versus a flat deductible. That means the deductible changes every year if you have a percentage. So it's very important that you check with your agent on that so you won't have any surprises.
I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster.
If you can build or reinforce your home to stand up to storms, you protect your family and your possessions. Unless you are in a flood zone, a well-built home lowers the odds that you have to evacuate. So does having a fortified home. Kelly tells us what fortified means.
Fortified is a construction term and re-roofing method that strengthens the areas of homes typically vulnerable to high winds and heavy rain to reduce storm damage. Roy Wright is the president of the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety. He says fortified homes can successfully withstand up to a Category 3 hurricane.
You look at the kind of impacts that have happened historically, whether that is going back to Sally most recently. And so hurricanes make direct hits here. And for those who've been around for decades, this is part of life. To have confidence in the home and in the structure you live, to know that when the wind comes through, it's going to hold up. When the wind comes through, you might lose your shingles, but there's a sealed roof deck, so the water is not pervading your entire house. You can move back in.
Brenda Breaux, the executive director of the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority, adopted fortified housing.
What we've embarked upon is we've installed and we've completed our 17 new homes which have been completed and are occupied by individuals in one of the oldest African American neighborhoods in the city of New Orleans.
Breaux says 11 more fortified homes are currently being built in another area of New Orleans. A fortified roof can cost you anywhere from $1,000 to $5,700 more than a conventional roof. Alabama residents may be able to deduct a portion of that cost from their income tax. I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster.
There's a wealth of information that varies by county and by state. So check the Hurricane Resource Guide on mynbc15.com in the Hurricane Center page. You'll find links to county emergency management agencies, information on tax credits, and, of course, the complete science behind hurricanes and their threats. When we come back, we'll meet not one, not two, but 3 different types of hurricane hunters. We are doing a little sky watching, something literally we all must do during hurricane season. Watch the sky, but also watch it with weather instruments like this. This is an instrument that is dropped from Hurricane Hunter airplanes into the ocean. It has a parachute to slow it down while it's falling. And while it's falling, the computer chip portion of this will send back information on temperature, humidity, wind, pressure, and it lets us know exactly what's going on inside of a hurricane. It is one of the best ways to collect data that way. I've had a chance 3 times to fly with the hurricane hunters and using this instrument figure out what's going on in a storm. But people often ask, well, why do you bother to even go into the storm? Let's bring in Captain Davis White, a hurricane hunter. He'll tell you why.
There's some things that we can only get from the center of the storm. Satellites can't pick it up, microwave radars can't pick it up. We have to fly into the storm to get some of that data.
He's talking, of course, about the U.S. Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters.
I had no idea that the data we collected from the airplane was used by so many people, not just the forecasters, but there's computer programmers, modelers, climatologists. There's all sorts of people that use the information that we collect.
The Air Force Reserve? Those are not the only hurricane hunters in a storm. NOAA also flies for data and for research.
So my job as a research scientist on the aircraft is to make sure that we're achieving all of our scientific goals of the mission. So we have another meteorologist who's part of the flight crew who's helping navigate the plane through safely. So that's similar to the meteorologists on the Air Force side. What we do as scientists is we're making sure all of the extra data that we can collect with our plane is being quality controlled and processed and transmitted off the planes, but we're also looking for opportunities for different ways to sample the storm or different areas to sample the storm to collect data that will help us, understand different processes that may be happening.
Now looking more official, Captain White elaborates.
We have a ton of sensors on the airplane. They're recording everything from temperature and moisture information in the air. We're looking for wind speeds. We're looking for turbulence. We're looking for lightning. As we fly in the daytime, we can see the surface of the ocean. And we have really great tactics and techniques to be able to determine wind speed, just to confirm what we're seeing on our instruments. We want to make sure that we capture the thumbprint for that particular storm so that the forecasters have a better understanding of how they can prepare everyone to evacuate as needed.
The data from the airplanes is valuable, but we also need data from the ground, known as ground truth. In comes hurricane chaser Josh Morgerman of iCyclone.
My big goal is to get right into the center of the hurricane where the important data are, to collect those little puzzle pieces that are going to help scientists afterward understand exactly what happened. How strong was it? Exactly what time did it come ashore? All those things.
We'll hear more from Josh a little later in the program about his experience in Hurricane Sally.
3:25 a.m. in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and I am in the eye of Hurricane Sally.
Coming up, things you must know about this season's tropical weather outlooks and the forecast cone. Part of being hurricane aware is having hurricane knowledge. And you know that at mynbc15.com in the Hurricane Center, you can gain all of that information. But here at GulfQuest, there's an exhibit called Ocean Today, which focuses on the oceans, but it also gives you an interactive look at how hurricanes form, how they move, and how they could possibly be so strong. It's data that drives the forecast. When the data changes, the forecast changes, whether it's the forecast cone, the storm location, the storm size, or the storm strength. New this year, the National Hurricane Center has changed not the actual forecast cone, but something called the Tropical Weather Outlook. The Tropical Weather Outlook is just for the possibility of a new named or numbered system forming.
Essentially, it's looking at disturbances that are already out over the Atlantic Basin, or systems that might form over the next few days, systems that might become hurricanes, tropical storms, tropical depressions. And what we're essentially doing is trying to put a probability or a chance that that weather system will become a tropical depression or tropical storm. Historically, that product has gone out looking over the next 5 days, and beginning this hurricane season, we're going to extend that out to the next 7 days.
Going out 7 days means the graphics you see will be busier. It also means from time to time, the areas where a system may develop will overlap with other areas. Now, that doesn't mean the systems will merge. It means one storm could form in a day or two, the other one could form in 5 or 6 days. But don't confuse the tropical weather outlook with the forecast cone, which is for an existing storm. But you do need to know how that forecast cone is made and what it means. We're going to do a little demonstration here in the atrium of GulfQuest Maritime Museum. I've got recycled paper in my trash bin, and these 3 targets are where I'm going to try to get the paper. Now, this is what you do in sports. It's what you do in any endeavor. You have a target, you try to reach it. But I know what's going to happen, and you know what's going to happen. The closer I am to the target, the more accurate I'll be. So watch this. It's not pretty, but it gets the point across. Think of this as a hurricane forecast. Within a day or two, you can reasonably get close to the target where you think the hurricane is going to go. You go a couple of days out, it gets a little bit harder, and then even farther out, it is definitely hard. And if you take these targets that I tried to reach and you draw a circle around each one indicating my average accuracy, the first thing you'll notice, sometimes I am outside of that circle. And when it comes to hurricane forecasting and making a forecast cone, you take all 3 of those circles and you connect the edges of those circles with a smooth curve. That is your forecast cone. It tells you that your target is usually in the cone, but not always. Don't forget that the forecast cone is the forecast only for the center of the storm. It is not for the impact. The impact could be extreme wind, tornadoes, flash flooding, and storm surge, all of which will happen both inside the cone and outside the cone. GulfQuest Maritime Museum, this is not a formal exhibit, but it is one now before the train gets here. I've got a leaf blower and there's water here. Imagine this is the Gulf of Mexico, and imagine that rock is your house on the beach. This is storm surge. So that's what we're talking about. When we say storm surge, it is rising water that rises at the coastline, but it also rises inland, following creeks and rivers. Storm surge simply means rising water due to wind. Run from the water, hide from the wind is another hurricane cliche that still holds. It means you must evacuate a storm surge or flood zone when told. But if it's just wind, you may be able to shelter in place. Track the variety of tropical watches and warnings with us on NBC 15 online, on our weather app, on Facebook Live, and on TV, where we give you more than just a number. We give you the context of the threats. When we return, we'll check back with iCyclone hurricane chaser Josh Morgerman for his perspective on Hurricane Sally.
The hurricane, the guts of it are still offshore, a couple hours probably. Sally really surprised me. So I was hunting it, and I remember I was in Gulf Shores, and I was in the Gulf Shores Fort Morgan area in the afternoon. We got absolutely thrashed, and I understand why people would be surprised. Wow, that was a Category 2, because that was quite a blow. So you have this thing in a hurricane, you have what's called pressure gradient, which is the change in air pressure over distance. The steeper the gradient, now it sounds like a nerdy thing, but it matters because the steeper the gradient, the more intense the winds usually. And one thing about Sally was that it had a very, very steep pressure gradient in the core, much steeper than I'm used to seeing in a Category 2 hurricane.
Sally was a slow-moving mess, a clear example that early forecasts of a storm can change, and the category of a storm by itself does not give the full story. This is why we prepare for the worst-case scenario. This is like the wind of a hurricane. I'm in the crow's nest, one of the exhibits here at GulfQuest that simulates the wind of a tropical storm or hurricane. As we prepare for hurricane season, you know to get ready before things happen, but in the worst case, you have to be ready after they happen. And in the worst case of a flood or even wind, you may lose your important documents. You've got to have these protected, especially from the threat of a high wind. Gone, just like that. Be prepared. Meteorologist Kelly Foster has more on protecting your documents.
In the aftermath of a hurricane, Gulf Coast residents can find themselves fishing for vital documents that vanished in the storm, and some may not realize how important they really are.
Yes, they are vital. Especially when it comes to the recovery process. Certain documents will be needed to show proof of ownership or occupancy of the home.
Those of utmost importance can include federal and state documents and personal documents that are necessary in recovering.
If the home is damaged, sometimes the documents may get damaged, or sometimes the place where the documents are housed, that place can be have damage as well too.
FEMA wants folks to reach out if they need replacements.
So we do have contact information of places in the event of, let's say, someone loses their birth or marriage certificates, or they may need it, or their social security card, driver's license, medical records. There are places that they can contact.
When hurricane-weary residents want to rebuild, another official document that is imperative is a building permit.
Permits protect the owners, residents, and communities and buildings by making sure construction meets current building codes, standards, flood ordinances, and construction techniques.
Permits may be required for nearly every part of your home, from roofs, walls, siding, plumbing, septic systems, and heating and air conditioning systems.
Local permit offices can provide suggestions or literature on how to protect the home or business from future disaster-related damages, as well as information on selecting licensed contractors to avoid scams.
FEMA suggests evacuating with these documents to get back on your feet faster. Then in the wake of the storm, there's no better protection for yourself and your property than a building permit. It'll give you a record of compliance where your home is better protected. I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster.
For more information on this and all the other things we've covered in this program, go to mynbc15.com to the Hurricane Center. This is Science on a Sphere, a look at the atmosphere back in 2020 when we saw Hurricane Sally move through the Gulf of Mexico, a storm that we remember. And it's a good reminder for you to remember. You hear this every year: bottled water, weather radio, flashlight, all the tools you need to be prepared for the next potential disaster.
Hurricane supplies fly off the shelves in a flash when a storm enters the Gulf. Any hiccup can cause huge headaches. Protect your family from a 2023 hurricane supply disaster by getting ready now. Stash cash, gas, and other basic necessities now, not later. It's never too early to stock up on water, non-perishable food, pet food, batteries, flashlights, first aid kits, non-prescription and prescription meds, baby formula, plyboard, diapers, and personal hygiene items. Keep all vehicles fueled up if you live in a hurricane-prone area and need to evacuate fast. Last but certainly not least, a weather radio is an essential part of an emergency preparedness kit. Besides basic models available, there is an all-hazards version, which includes AM/FM stations and a flashlight. Other items you may not think of include a solar charger and a battery charger. Portable and whole house generators are lifesavers when the power goes out. The key is not to wait until the last minute. You don't want to be in a frenzy, waiting in long lines and delayed when it's time to leave. Plus, without prep, there will undoubtedly be something you forgot and can't get your hands on. I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster.
And when there's a storm that's a clear threat, follow the forecast updates with full attention.
We need to keep checking back because the last thing we want is that regret. If I had just looked at the weather forecast half a day later, I would have made a different decision.
Be ready, have a plan. We're going into hurricane season and treat it the way you treat driving your vehicle. You want to make sure your tire pressure is good. You want to make sure you've got oil with clean windshield wipers. And most importantly, as we go through hurricane season, just like when you're driving, you don't want to look way down the road. You need to look at the cross streets that you're coming up to because that's where the danger could be. Whatever you do, put on that seatbelt. And when you talk about home safety, treat it like an airbag in your vehicle. You wouldn't get a vehicle without an airbag. Have a plan. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls. Be safe.